Hey, welcome to the Road and Morale podcast. So do you ever feel like screaming out in the office, on Zoom or outside the school gates? For the love of God, come on, really? And if this is you and you're looking for an honest, fun and frank podcast on life and business, then sit back and listen to me, Rona Morale. I'll be bringing great people on the show to talk, share and debate their life experiences and business challenges, keeping the show unpolished, but in a fun and unique British style, with sarcasm, tenacity, or maybe a few swear words or tears. This podcast keeps it real, honest, raw, and removes the bullshit in the only way I know how, through authenticity and getting shit done. Think of it less like the Housewives of New York or Towie with the lipo and drama, and more like the house lives of the real world. I hope you'll take something away to be better informed, laugh, smile, or maybe even finally getting the confidence to shout, come on really. So enjoy. Hey, hi Jim, welcome to the Rona Morale podcast. How are you today?
Hello, Rona. I'm okay actually. I've been enjoying a spot of Yorkshire sunshine in God's own county.
Oh, fabulous. I mean, we've had a bit of a hit and miss day today, but yeah, sun's still shining, so that's great. So listen, to all the listeners out there, I have the absolute pleasure to introduce James May, but I know him as Jim. And we first met back in 2000 when I started on my journey. I moved down to London and started at Red Bull. And then over the years, I guess I've always been known to be a little bit or a lot tenacious, and Jim absolutely is one hell of a tenacious person. I was going to say son of a bitch, but no, person. And and in 2004, when we were actually sharing a flat in Wandsworth in London, Jim decided he was going to set up his own business called the Rat Race. And that started with just a laptop in a shared flat, and right through now you manage a global team. And what you really do is you kind of take people from all over the world and get them to do extraordinary things. So it's all around adventure sports and the challenges around those. And as you already said, you live in York and you have a beautiful wife and two delicious children. As I say, today really is about the levels of tenacity that you and I have probably gone through, some that have bit us in the butt and some that haven't. So please share with us a little bit more history about the Rat Race, because I think people would want to know about it. And then we'll move on to being tenacious.
Yeah, okay, no problem. Well, like you say, I mean, Rat Race was born in 2004, literally at the table, at the dining room table that we shared in a flat in Wandsworth. And I remember the first time we obviously we worked together at Red Bull before that, and we were exposed to a lot of the Red Bull kind of marketing cult, as I like to call it. We were kind of indoctrinated with all these fantastic and sort of audacious ideas that Red Bull, the Red Bull brand was getting us to come up with. And it was an absolutely fantastic learning curve at Red Bull. And I think that probably, set me on my path to create this sort of wacky company that I now run. But I guess one thing that we learned at Red Bull very, very early on, and we were very good at, was spending money, spending other people's money. We were in the marketing team. That was our job. We were exactly, we were meant to spend budget on really, really interesting and elaborate events and athlete sponsorships and all this sort of stuff. And as a young lad, or a young girl straight out of university, etc., as we were, that was fantastic work. And I think it certainly gave me a confidence, in terms of, right, we've got this idea, we know it can be done, let's do it. There was almost nothing that would stand in your way with that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But equally on the other side, it didn't really teach, certainly me, it didn't really teach me anything about the kind of the real world life of business or commerce. It was about doing cool stuff. So I kind of had to learn that pretty quickly and very much the hard way when I went out on my own.
But don't you think, though, had you have had all of that knowledge, but without that, just let's get on and do it, and that vision, you probably would have scared yourself and not done it.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, certainly with Tenacity, there's a fine line, I think, between confidence, perhaps belligerence, perhaps the arrogance of youth, and
Yeah.
sometimes having humility to say, right, well, you know what, I don't actually know everything about this. Let's learn a little bit more, and then go for it. But I think, certainly in those early days of setting up Rat Race, and very much from the school of Red Bull, I very much had the blinkers on, and I think it did help me as much as it hindered me. It, like you say, it gave you that, right, let's just do it because it can be done. We know it can be done, and you have all this enthusiasm and sort of confidence of youth, but not necessarily all of the backstory. And it is very much a blend because, if you study for too long, if you go down, very, very sort of long-term corporate channels, etc., very structured education, sometimes you maybe lose that as well. So I
Yeah.
think, kind of as I've got on in life and got older, not necessarily wiser, you sort of come to think of that blend and say, well, hang on a minute, is it time to stop and think and pause and think about something a bit more, or is it really time just to go for it? And that's judgment, isn't it? And you're never
Yeah.
necessarily going to get it all right. But having a healthy dose of sort of can do tenacity, trying hard, maybe being a bit stubborn from time to time, has definitely pulled me through,
Yeah.
some interesting times.
So obviously the business has been going for 16 years, so hugely successful. And can you think of some examples where, let's park 2020, let's not talk about
Yeah,
it right now.
I definitely
Um,
needed a lot of tenacity to get through this one.
but
Yeah,
in the past, where you've really dialed up that either stubbornness or tenacity, and it's kind of maybe an example where it's worked really well and an example where it might have backfired.
yeah. I mean, I think, a lot of what I do. There's my story and how I've kind of managed the business and grown it and whatnot. But what I see every day in a normal year, granted not this year, is people struggling with these challenges that we're actually setting them. I mean, my business Rat Race, we put on these adventure challenges all over the world. And it started with an initial event in Edinburgh. There were people running, biking, kayaking, navigating all over the city. It was a very sort of imaginative, innovative format. We kind of took all these adventure sports, out of the wilderness, out of their traditional places, and put them on the streets of the city. And there was TV and there was sponsors. It was all very cool, but it was very niche. And as this business has grown over time, over the last 16 years, what I do has actually become more mainstream as well.
Right. Yeah.
People doing 5K runs, transitioning to half marathons, transitioning to marathons, sportive riding on bikes, etc. And we've managed to kind of harness that growth in adventure sports to the point where now we have, I do call it kind of, ordinary folk, regular folk, like us, doing extraordinary things in places like Outer Mongolia and Panama and Namibia and all these sort of places. And that's where we take people. And the tenacity that I see from these guys, on a daily basis at these things is pretty humbling.
Yeah.
Um, I guess to boil it down to some examples from my own sort of my own stable, there was there's this one particular event I'm very very proud that we've sort of brought to the market. We haven't actually run it yet because of COVID. We're meant to run it for the first time this year, but it takes place in Panama, and it's called the Panama
Right.
Coast to Coast. No surprises for guessing what it does. It goes from one side of Panama to the other, coast to coast, and it's a crossing on foot and by what's called a pack raft. It's a little miniature raft that you raft down a river.
Right.
You go from one side of Panama to the other. Very, 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 very hard event. Very difficult through the jungle. Lots at stake. Lots of objective danger, snakes, all sorts of stuff. And to put that event together from an initial concept to actually putting it on the ground for a number of people to go and do this. Clearly, I'm very proud of that. But in terms of the sort of the tenacity, you know, I had to go to Panama. I didn't speak a lot of Spanish, so I taught myself some Spanish. Dos cervezas per favor was pretty much about my limit. And I knocked on the door. I used my kind of soft event skills that I've earned over the years, and knocked on, just literally went and knocked on doors in Panama City, and navigated my way from quite a few no's. No, we can't help you with this. We're not quite sure what you want to do. Not quite sure what you're talking about. To find some guys that could help me. And from that initial sort of kernel of an idea, right? I've looked at this map. there's the isthmus of the Americas here. I think we could go from one side of it to another, and I think we
Yeah.
could take ordinary people and do this. I banged on enough doors where we got to the point where we went and we did what we call a recce, a test pilot recce. We take a small group of people and we try and go and do this on our own. So we went into the jungle with some guides, with we'd sent some, I found some people that had some kind of local tribal contacts in this area.
Yeah.
And they went in first and they spent a week kind of trying to put together this route through this very, very pristine, virgin primary jungle terrain. And there's no real routings through there. People sort of don't go into this area. And they reported back saying, yeah, we think we can do this. So off I went with a team of people. And we went in. And the first time we went into this place, it went pretty pear-shaped. We didn't succeed
Right.
in our mission. And often it takes several times to get to the point where you will succeed in this thing. And in that particular one, I was very much out of my comfort zone. I didn't know a lot about the jungle, and clearly I'd surrounded myself with people that did.
Yeah.
But through this sort of having knocked on a few doors in Panama City to literally being there with a backpack on in the jungle, still thinking this can work, well, it did work. And eventually we launched that event, having done sort of 2 maybe 3 years of R&D,
Wow,
having
that's a
lost
lot.
in the jungle several times. One of the guys that was on that original test pilot trip, had some fairly bad heat exhaustion when we were out there. There was some medical issues, etc. And we launched it and we put it into the market and we sold it out.
Wow.
And that's for me, that's I guess that's an example from my process of where I kind of know the idea will work. I've just got to stick with it long enough to get to the point where it does work.
And, I guess that actually every time you try and you fail, that's just another part of the learning, and you go, okay, right, we need to factor that in and we'll learn. But I guess by the very nature of what you do and the events that you put on, it's not meant to be easy. It's not meant to be just a nice tarmac path through the jungle. So I guess that constantly having to keep going no matter what, and not be deflected.
Yeah, absolutely. It isn't meant to be easy, and I think that cliche that experience is the name we give to our mistakes is cliches are kind of there for a reason. They sort of make sense, and that one definitely does. And I think if you can harness the positives in the negatives in your life, whether that's business or whatever, and sort of kind of have the confidence to say, right, that didn't really go as well as I wanted that time, but I can learn from that and I can then adapt that and do something a little bit different next time. It doesn't mean the whole idea has to fail. It means you adapt, you change, and you continue.
And have you mentioned earlier about there's kind of 2 sides of Tenacity for you. It's you and your DNA, but it's also about the people that go on these trips and challenges with you. You mentioned about ordinary people. Now, I'm embarrassed to admit I've got you on my podcast and I've never done one of your challenges. Maybe because I'm shit scared of doing one, but I guess how much of the tenacity of the people keeps you going and creating something harder and more challenging and demanding? What influence do your clients have on you?
Yeah, I mean that's really why I do it. I mean we're the guys that work at Rat Race, myself included. We're not like superhuman ex special forces soldiers, ex Olympians, anything like that. We're regular Joes, regular punters. And I think the lowest common denominator for me is if we can go out there and achieve these challenges, then so can a very broad cross section of people. There was one.
Saying I could.
I'm not saying you could. I'm saying you will, Rona. You're coming. You've laid it down.
We should make that a deal. Actually, we should say, right, 2021, I have to do one of your challenges.
All you've got to choose now is jungle, desert, or polar. Which one's it going to be?
Oh my God, desert. No. See, polar. I go polar or jungle.
Yeah. See, a lot of people say desert because they sort of, it'd be nice and hot. I can have a cocktail afterwards. But they're all pretty.
No, I got married in the desert. As some of my listeners will know, I travelled out to the Sahara Desert and got married there. And my husband got so drunk that night that I was the only one waking up early to watch the sunrise.
And he's displayed tenacity ever since.
Yeah, cheeky sod. But yeah, no, let's do it.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. it really is a test of ordinary people. And I remember this one time I was going out to Mongolia. We have an event out there called the Mongol 100. In fact, it was meant to be this year. It was meant to, every year Sport Relief do a challenge.
Yeah.
And this year it was meant to be, we were organising it for Sport Relief. It was meant to be based on our Mongol 100 challenge. And of course, coronavirus, stopped play, and we actually switched it. And we did take them to the desert. Actually, we took some celebrities to the Namibian desert.
Is that now? That's when I saw you on TV. No, I saw that,
That's right.
didn't I?
You did see
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Okay. So
I was kind of wrapped up and fairly well disguised in a Crocodile Dundee hat, I think. But yeah, that was me on TV. But yeah, this Mongol 100 event, I mean, it's pretty serious stuff. It's a 100-mile journey over a frozen lake in the middle of outer Mongolia. It gets down to -47. It really, really is cold. And participants have the ability to do this on foot, or they can bike it, or they can choose ice skates. They can literally skate the whole length of this lake, 100 miles, 1 meter.
That's awesome.
It's insane. And I remember being in Heathrow the day before we flew out there, and I was staying in a hotel there, and got up in the morning, and of course I've always been a fan of a breakfast buffet, as you'll know, Rena. And I was filling up on bacon and whatnot, and I noticed this guy, and he had, it's a bit of a giveaway when you get to these places because everyone's got these massive jackets on, just really ridiculous clothes.
Yeah.
Looked like the Michelin Man, and he was standing in the buffet queue, and I could tell he was visibly distressed. He was really, really, frankly, shitting himself.
Yeah.
And I kind of clocked him, and I thought, you're going to Mongolia, clearly the time of day, the flights that were boarding, etc. And I went up to him and I said, are you going to Mongolia for Mongol 100? And I didn't reveal, that I was one of the organisers or whatever. He said,
yeah,
I am. Are you going too? I said, yeah. And he says, I've got to tell you, I've had sleepless nights for months about this. I'm really nervous. I almost got in the car and went home. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm thinking. And this chap, he was probably in his early 50s, and he was despairing of this. I said, look, don't worry, stick with it. Get on the plane. You'll be absolutely grand. And the journey I saw that man go through, from that point at the breakfast buffet in the Holiday Inn Express at Heathrow to, completing this 100 miles across this frozen lake in outer Mongolia, his whole beard caked in ice. It was absolutely astonishing. It was incredible.
Yeah.
He's gone on to do loads more of these challenges, and the sort of the journey within himself is humbling to see that. It really is.
And that's what I guess sometimes you think of a holiday company, or you're doing these challenges. I think that really, when you mentioned it earlier, it really is anyone can do it. And I'm not saying, I feel like if I tried something like that and I failed halfway through, or something happened medically or whatever, I would still take a massive buzz from it, because I got off my arse, I'd booked it, I'd trained for it, and I'd given it my absolute all. So it must be amazing, like you say, to see that person. And then at what point actually did he clock that you were an organizer, or did you meet him at the end? Was there any sort of...
Well, I mean, I probably told him, later on in that conversation, but I didn't say, I'm the guy in charge, etc. He probably only realised that when I stood up, at the sort of the announcement when we got there. But often, when I'm doing my own events, I like to do my own stunt training.
Really?
Yeah. When I'm sort of taking part in these things, sometimes I will, just kind of hike alongside somebody or ride alongside them or whatever, and I'll just start chatting to them, and I won't say who I am and that I work for Rat Race or the company or whatever. I'll just chat to them about their experience and what they're doing, and you get a lot out of people that way. They're just talking to you as another person in the event.
Yeah.
And people tend to open up a lot when they're doing these things. There's a kind of a shared solidarity of the trail, if you like.
Yeah.
And when you put yourself in these really out there locations, people, they open up about really profound stuff, their own mental health issues, their own physical issues, their own family issues, and it's a real leveler. Whilst the challenge is physical, it's also clearly very, very mental, and I think that it breaks the barriers down between folk, and they just end up really kind of mucking in together and helping each other out.
And I think when I could assume, maybe I am going to find out one day, but I could assume that you put a lot of trust into that journey, and it's going to be hard. So you're more open to that rawness. And actually, I'm in the middle of a jungle in Panama, chatting to this random. I'm never going to see him again. So you just pour your heart out, I guess. And
yeah,
I think for you as a business owner as well, you're going to get so much raw data and emotion and feedback that helps you then, I guess, develop other trips or, know which ones have really working for you. How many different trips do you do?
Well, next year, because of the compression of the calendar, obviously we've had to knock everything from this year into touch. Basically, we've got 45 trips and events.
Wow.
In a normal year, it's somewhere between 20 and 30. Next year it's 45. So I'm certainly going to get to know that breakfast buffet at Heathrow Airport pretty well.
And you won't, but you wouldn't normally do all of them, would you? Or would you?
No, not personally. No. I mean, I will either be working on those events, perhaps as what we call race director in charge of the thing, or I'd perhaps be taking part, in some of our recce events, and some of them, yeah, I mean, some of them I will sit out. I personally, physically can't be away from the family for that length of time.
No.
But yeah, I'm at most of them, and whether it's sort of there on point, firing the starting gun, as it were, or somewhere behind the scenes, unblocking a portaloo, I'm still, still at the events doing something practical, because you get something out of it every time.
Yeah. How did you kind of get involved in UNICEF? Did they? I work with a few people actually in UNICEF, but
In sport relief.
yeah. So yeah, sorry. So did they approach you, or were you?
Yeah, they approached us. So they'd seen this event that we've been discussing there, the Mongol 100. They'd seen one of our videos online. It's pretty photogenic stuff, and I think they were looking for something to up the ante on the kind of the annual sport relief, comic relief challenge that they do. And it was a TV production company that got in touch with me, who made the program on behalf of the BBC, and they called me up and said, look, we can see this event that you're doing. Could you format it for a small group of celebrities? And I said, yeah, absolutely, no problem.
You're like that? No, no, I can't do it.
It's not my gig. Move on. And it was a very, very interesting process, that one, because we were dealing with the sort of the physiology of the event itself, but equally there was all these other layers. There's the TV output, there's the fundraising output. Sport relief, comic relief, it's a huge fundraising operation, and clearly the sort of the entourage and the back end that goes with that is quite significant. So the event wasn't necessarily just about the 7 celebs that came out to do it. It was about the guy that was there from the one show getting his satellite just right, to beam it back to 6 million people. It was making sure that the fundraising messages were okay and the satellite phones were working so that they could get the the tweets out and whatnot, and that so Louise Minchin could beam live back to BBC Breakfast, and there was a hell of a lot going on. And with that one, I mean that absolutely was a case study in tenacity, because our plan A was to take 7 celebrities to Mongolia, into conditions that were pretty much polar, sort of -30, that sort of thing. And because of the virus, this was meant to be in late Feb. Mongolia obviously has a land border with China, and it was unfolding clearly in that part of the world before it unfolded anywhere else. Mongolia locked down super quick, absolutely literally overnight. And we got sort of some intel back from our guys on the ground saying, look, this is the place is going to lock down. And we were like, lock down? What? You can't do that. You can't lock down a whole country.
How dare you lock down Mongolia?
how little did we know?
And also the irony that there was 7, so it's good job it wasn't over here. You'd be like, no, one celeb's got to go.
Exactly, that's right. Yeah. That's a good point. So Mongolia locked down, and I remember being in this discussion with I don't think he was the deputy director general of the BBC, but it was somebody pretty high up in the BBC. Lots of people from Comic Relief, the TV production company. We were all in this conference call, and basically said, look, we can't go. It's just too much of a risk. We're going to get there, and we're going to get locked down. We're going to get caught there. So I said, look, we do have a plan B here. We could take people from -30 to +30, and we could take them.
Did you already have a plan B, or were you already, as soon as you knew what was going on in Asia and the border with Mongolia, you thought, I need another plan here, I don't want to lose this?
It was pretty much the latter. I mean, there's always contingency plans on contingency plans, but in this one, it was all about what we can do in Mongolia, and we never really thought that a global pandemic could shut the thing down to the point where we would have to just look at another part of the world. And the Comet Relief team, they were understandably, and certainly the TV team, they wanted to look at somewhere else cold. They said, well, can we go to Siberia, or can we go to the Arctic tundra of northern Quebec, or Scandinavia? And I sort of said, well, we can, but we can't turn that on in a week. We literally had a week, to turn the contingency around. I said, what we can do is we can go to Namibia, where we have a very good template. It's in the desert. Clearly, it's not, the same environment, but it's the way that we would support that event, on the ground is very similar.
Similar,
We've
yeah.
got a very good operator that can help us, and crucially, they can turn it on in a week, and there's absolutely no coronavirus there. So, they sort of had a conflab, and they came back and they said, all right, let's do it. And to their credit, they trusted, me to put this thing on in a week. And so we, trained the guns on Namibia and said, right, check with our guys out there, we're coming. And, you guys better be ready. And they pulled it massively out the bag. Everybody did. It was some feat. And yeah, 7 days later, I think 3 days later, I was on a plane to Windhoek. 7 days later, we had a helicopter fly in, Frankie Bridge, Grimmy, Louise Minchin, Christian Guru Murphy, Judge Rinder, etc. Into base camp in the middle of the Namibian desert. It was a random selection of people, and it was a totally random operation, but it worked. It was great. So yeah, sticking with it, getting through it, and just.
Because was it Grimmy that didn't quite make it? He couldn't finish it.
That's right. Grimmy got heat exhaustion.
That was it. Yeah.
Yeah, he got pretty unwell on day one because of the heat.
But I guess that's where actually, when you talked earlier about being tenacious and a little bit pig-headed and confident and arrogant, actually in environments like that in the world that you work in, there's also a level to know when to back off and when to say, stop, enough's enough, because whether that be impacting your health, your mental health, you've got to know when to stop.
Well, that absolutely correct, and that's for the individual as well as the team, operating these things, and sometimes the individual, you get the blinkers on and you have to manage the individual. You have to sort of second guess what the individual's doing. And we had some interesting scenarios in that event. Having turned it around and all arrived in Namibia, this wouldn't have been seen on the TV program because this is quite a hard thing to explain on TV. But there was a massive storm. There was a flash flood in the Namib Desert. Now it doesn't rain at all.
Ever.
In the desert. It's the driest place on earth. And there's a riverbed there, and the riverbed was going to be part of our mountain biking journey. It's called the Qseb Riverbed, and it hasn't flowed, like literally no water in it for 11 years. And we get there, and there's this enormous torrential electrical storm in the middle of the Namib Desert. And like I say, they didn't show it on the TV program because it's really difficult to, if you've got 45 minutes to, do a program, it's very hard to. Right, we're in the driest place on earth, and now it's raining. So, but this was all kind of going on behind the scenes, and as we drove out of camp, the following morning, the Qseb River Valley was a river, and that was that was a big curveball. So we had to can it. We had to can that stage. There's no way we could send people into that environment, and we sent some scouts in, and we had what it was doing. It was like, no, we just can't do this. And assessing and knowing when those sort of practical limits are reached is clearly a big part of my job. And knowing, as you say, when not to push it is as important as knowing when you can push it, whether that's in a business way or a professional way or whatever.
But even that, I mean, going from, a major event that you're working with, you're going to Mongolia, you're not going to Mongolia, you've planned it in a week, you've gone to Namibia, and then it's frigging rains and it hasn't done for 11 years. And then you're like, well, that's part of it I now can't do. I think that constant ability to be able to think on the spot, keep everyone safe, and still make a great TV program. I mean, that must have been a huge experience for you and the team.
It was massive, yeah. It was huge, and pulling that off as a collective effort. Everybody kind of working 24/7 to do it. There's a real kind of buzz that you get out of doing that. And at the time, sometimes it feels very uncomfortable, but it's always the case that afterwards you sort of look back, a little bit through rose tinted specs and say, oh well, it wasn't that bad, was it? But you know, even at the time, you kind of, you know, the sort of the sense of mission is pulling you through. And
Yeah.
I think, I don't know, you know, not to get too profound, but a sort of a firm acceptance and belief in the philosophy of the Stoics is useful here. It's like, you know, things do happen, you know, shit happens, and you've got to deal with it, and that's just life.
Yeah.
And being able to get through that with a sort of healthy dose of shrugging the shoulders and say, right, well, we've got to sort this now, haven't we? That's just part of it, you know.
And you know what, I've always been a massive, you know, believer of that, and probably hence why we've always got on. And I think it is that I've just realized that one of the biggest lessons I took from the early days of Red Bull is that whilst everything was wonderful and rosy, and, you know, you're spending all this money and blah, 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 when things start to get tough, that's when you really learn how to become a better person, an employer, a wife, a husband, whatever it might be. And so you get, like you say, at the time you're like, oh, I can't deal with this. But I'm not sure it's rose tinted glasses when you look back. It's more of a confidence that you've been through that journey and you've learned.
Yeah, definitely being able to lean on those experiences, a bit of a crutch, and say, well, look, I've been here before. You know, I know how this plays out. I know what I can do to get through it. I think that's, you know, this sort of sense of digging in. I think that's a real strength in people when you see it, and knowing that you can sort of deploy that, you know, that sort of solidity, that tenacity, is very important, definitely.
Yeah, and I guess this year has pushed many, many entrepreneurs and business owners like you to the point of having to think differently and create new concepts, or, you know, like you clearly have an insane calendar next year. Why have you chosen to kind of to cram so much into next year? Is it to make up for this year? Is it just because there's so many people wanting to do these?
Well, it's a bit of both. I mean, we have had to defer a lot of activity into next year. So, you know, we've literally done, well, I mean, that event that we've just discussed there for Sport Relief, you know, that was the last event we did. That was in February, literally sort of 2-3 weeks before UK lockdown. And since then, we haven't done any activity whatsoever. So there's there's a necessity for us to defer the activity we were going to do, and to forge ahead with new stuff. I mean, we're launching stuff at the moment for 2022, even 2023, and there's no shortage of desire for people to get out there and do stuff in sort of what I call the kind of the land beyond COVID, quote unquote, whenever that may be. So at the moment, yeah, we've sort of through necessity, we've had to defer a lot of activity. And had we not deferred it, you know, had we just cancelled outright that activity, we'd have been in serious trouble. You know, we went from riding high, you know, BBC One primetime Sport Relief, you know, at the end of February to, you know, midway through June, literally, you know, sitting in my bedroom, you know, wondering what the hell we were going to do, because all of a sudden we were having to, you know, defer all this activity. So it has been a crisis, and, you know, you know, crisis management has been deployed on many levels, and one of the you know, one of the things that we decided is the activity that we could have done this year, we kind of have to do next year. You know, so yeah, needs must, really.
Well, you know, and I think at the end of the day, I guess if there was a person listening to this podcast now and they were thinking, oh, I've not heard of the rat race, oh, I'm kind of up for a challenge, I've had a pretty shit year. Is it really for anybody, any age, any ability?
Yeah, I mean, we have what I sort of call I mean, we've got a portfolio of events. You know, it's not all in Mongolia. I mean, we do stuff, you know, from central London to out to Mongolia, and you know, we've got stuff that's sort of 10K in length. We've got stuff that's kind of introductory mountain biking or running or trekking, and people tend to you know, keep
Build
going
up.
through this pyramid of progression. You know, they're going, I wouldn't say perpetually more extreme, that's the wrong word, but they're pushing themselves more. So, you know, they might do an event with us that's a one-day event in Cornwall, and we've got, you know, a fantastic event down there, for example, at Land's End, where people are sort of running along the coast and jumping in the sea and doing loads of cool stuff. And they might think, wow, that was brilliant. I've just done 20 miles with my mates. I've had a beer afterwards. I've camped. And all of a sudden they're looking at our calendar or you know, other things in the space, you know, and they're saying, well, okay, in a couple of years, you know, maybe I could do that thing in Mongolia, or maybe I could do that thing that Grimmy did, you know, in Namibia. And they start to sort of to trade up, you know, through the levels. They get more confidence. And I see this a lot. A lot of people have met us and our organization from having started with park run, for example, a 5K timed, free run around the park, or Race for Life, where the Cancer Research UK Race for Life. And these are what I sort of call gateway drugs, to our world of adventure and challenge, and getting in at some level and then just progressing. You get that confidence, you want to do something more. And for us, once you start going to these destinations, we find that people just can't get enough. They love it. They know they've got them in themselves, and they just love going to places that are just, off grid.
And I guess when you're doing something quite so raw and challenging, your clients, I guess, are making friends for life in a lot of instances as well. And
yeah, absolutely. They're getting so much more out of this than just the physical challenge. And again, to take it back to sort of us, the company behind it, again, we're regular Joes. We're not creating what I would call a suffer fest. We don't want people to come and do these things and just fail and just say, oh my God, that's horrific. I don't want to do that again. We want to make sure they look around and they see the scenery and they feel a sense of achievement, sort of sense of pride in having done this, not just to destroy them. And I think that's, there's a lot of that sort of stuff in the industry that I work in, stuff that's just hard for the sake of being hard. And that's not really us,
No, but if you could take a celebrity and make them suffer, who would it be?
Oh my God. I could take a celebrity and make them suffer. I've got to try not to be too controversial political here.
No, you can.
Well, I think anybody spending a week with me in the desert's going to suffer. You put me on the spot now. Who would it be? I would have to say Elton John.
Okay.
Because I was meant to go and see Elton this year, actually. Obviously, that's been kicked into touch. I think someone like Elton John he'd be fascinating, because I think he'd come to it with a really pre-formed conception of this. He just would not. He's a good example of somebody that I just don't think would be into it. I don't think he'd get it, etc. And because he's so tenacious, he's had an incredible career, etc. He might just be the sort of person that flips the switch and say, you know what, I am going to throw myself all in on this. And whilst he's been a mega performer, etc., etc. As soon as a little bit like when Eddie Izzard, I don't know if you can remember, Eddie Izzard did like 50, I think it was 50 marathons on the trot. And you're like, how's that guy done that?
That's inhumane. Like, I honestly don't know how the human body can do that. But then you realise you can.
You can, exactly. And you sort of think, well, if Eddie Izzard can, I can. And that's what I'm saying with Elton. I think, like, if Elton laid it down and we were there to witness it, I think it'd be pretty strong.
Okay, so if anybody knows Elton John, or he has to be listening, Jim has set down the challenge. And I guess another area that must have been frustrating, when you do something like Sport Relief in February and you get, huge awareness. I know it was all about Sport Relief, but people are going to want to know, what's this trip, and they find out about you. You've then got this opportunity of a huge growth in terms of demand and interest, and then we shut down. Did that happen?
Yeah, I think in a normal year it would have been a massive boost for us. But, like you say, literally the week we got back on the Monday, it was like, oh my God, it's here in the UK now. Well, it was here already, but, we're talking about the whole discussion has moved to COVID. We've got to go dark. We just got to, batten down the hatches. And all of a sudden that whole PR machine that we could have harnessed is just gone. It's evaporated, and the world's moved on. So I think, that's gutting. But equally, again, you've got to shrug your shoulders and say, well, it is what it is. People have had, much harder, kind of knocks in this thing than that. We've taken what could have been a real positive, and we've just not been able to harness it commercially for the business. And there'll be a day when we can come back and we can do that. And, I was with a doctor the other day. I was doing a medical, and he saw the logo on my jacket, and he asked me about it. And I said, yeah, we did, we do these things. We did something recently in Namibia. He was like, oh yeah, I saw something in Namibia. There was a load of celebrities in the desert. I said, yeah, that was us. Oh, wow. Yeah, cool. Yeah, I saw that. So it will come back. There'll be a time when we can join the stuff, and we can rise again like a phoenix from the flames.
Definitely. And as part of that, relaunching to next year, that content and everything there is still there. And I guess hopefully you had such a great connection with the guys out there. Hopefully they'll come knocking again. And I'm sure if nothing else, you'll be on the phone to them going, are we doing next year and what are we doing? That's certainly not the sort of thing that you would let go. But so if there was one trip out of all of your stuff that you do, what one would you say I should try?
The one that I say right. What are you into? Are you into running or biking? Do you like kayaking? Have you ever done kayaking?
I've done kayaking. When you ask, am I into running or biking?
Let's rephrase that. Can you run?
Not very well, no.
But you've got 2 legs.
I've got 2 legs. I can ride a bike, and I have tried kayaking and done a little bit of whitewater.
So what I would suggest then, I think, is we've got an event called Scotland Coast to Coast, which again is pretty Ronseal, does what it says on the tin, goes from one side of Scotland to the other. And it's been in our portfolio for years. We've run this event for probably 12 years. It's a fantastic journey, and it goes from the east coast of Scotland to the west. And it takes in a lot of the icons of the Scottish Highlands, Loch Ness, Glencoe, Cawdor Castle, where Macbeth used to live. And it's a beautiful journey, and it's really what I would call doable. It's doable with mates or family, friends over a weekend. So day one, you run or trek about 10k down this river.
Okay, I can do that.
From the coast, and you get to Cawdor Castle, where you pick up a bike. And you cycle about 70k on roads, on good, quiet, minor roads. Frequently into a headwind. It is a little bit hilly, as you could imagine, in Scotland.
Now, hold on a minute. When you say a little bit hilly, that's like a mountain for me.
Well, there's a couple of molehills, yeah. So, I mean, if it wasn't tough, you wouldn't be there, would you?
No.
So yeah, that takes you into a beautiful place called Fort Augustus at the head of Loch Ness, and then you overnight there. You can camp. There's some lovely hotels, bit of fish and chips. A few calories on board, maybe a couple of sports beers to put the nutrition on the go for the next day, and then you start out on your bike again the next day,
Right.
and you do some off-road biking. It's not massively what I would call technical biking. It's all sort of on fire trails, Land Rover tracks, etc.
Okay.
And then you're back on the road again on the bike, and then you ditch your bike in Fort William, which is towards the west coast of Scotland, and you do quite a big trekking stage. Some people run it, but you don't have to. You can trek it, and it's about 20k on foot over what's called the West Highland Way, which is sort of the shoulder of Ben Nevis, UK's highest mountain. And that trek brings you down to a stunning loch, Loch Leven, which is a sea loch. It is the west coast.
Wow.
And the final bit of this event is a kayak, is a paddle across this loch to finish at this amazing hotel called the Isles of Glencoe Hotel, past the old Clan MacDonald burial islands. And it is very, very evocative way to finish the event. And that for us is a classic. And I swear anybody can do that event.
Okay.
A little bit of training, turn up, give it a pop, you'll get through it. And that, I think, perhaps might be your gateway drug runner.
Right. Well, I'm going to look into it. Definitely. And for any of my listeners as well, please do. Jim obviously has had a hugely successful company for nearly 20 years now, and what you do and the experience that you've brought to it, and that journey is incredible. So if anyone wants to check the business out, it is www.ratrace.com. And yeah, look, listen, thank you so much for taking the time out to chat with me. And as always, it's a pleasure to see you, but thank you for bringing your honesty and rawness to the chat. And I hope people have taken something away in terms of, that resilience, that tenacity, and, kind of never giving up, really. So thank you so much.
No problem, Rena. Nice to be on the show.
Take care. Cheers.
Cheers.
Bye.
So that's it. You've made it. The show's over. Thank you for being with us. I hope you've been able to take something away, maybe solve a problem, or just know you're not alone. Here's hoping it made you smile with a few laughs along the way. Please feel free to find me on all social media channels, and you can subscribe to my YouTube channel. Just search the Rona Morale Podcast. Have an awesome day, and see you next time.